So I'm Vivian Felten. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Connecticut. I'm the statewide outreach coordinator. So just going to talk to you a little bit today about some of our conservation practices and how our programs work. So we're a federal agency, a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we're non-regulatory. We have conservation programs. They're all voluntary, and our goal is to help just promote more sustainable landscapes. We started in the 1930s in the Dust Bowl, called the helping with soil erosion on the farm. And then we broadened our scope over time. In the mid-90s, we became the Natural Resources Conservation Service and looked at not just soil erosion on the farm, but also looking at air and water and plants, animals, and energy. And then looking not just on the farm, but on a broader perspective, like in a watershed basis, realizing what we do on our farms affects downstream. For example, improving soil health and nutrient management on your farm helps improve the water quality of Long Island Sound and the farms down there. And now, even on a broader perspective, now we're looking at our practices, our conservation practices, and the climate. So we really feel like farmers have a critical role to play to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, sequester carbon, and help actually with solutions to climate crisis. And implementation of our conservation practices can help farmers not just adapt to the weather extremes, but to also help mitigate the effects of climate change in some cases. So I keep talking about conservation practices. We have a lot of conservation practices. You can find the list of Connecticut ones, and I know there's Massachusetts people here too. Every state has a list that they work from on the field office guide there. And this year we've come up with a subset of those practices that are considered climate smart agriculture practices. And those are practices that actually have been, we've been able to measure how they can mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and improve carbon storage. There's a lot of other practices that are also, very effective, but these are the ones on our list so far. And our scientists are going to be reviewing and updating, as we speak. It's a new evolving thing, but we help farmers make improvements by putting those practices together into conservation systems. And we do that by offering technical assistance. And we also have financial assistance programs where we provide an incentive payment for folks to install those conservation practice systems. And we work on all size farms, and all kinds of farms, so traditional farming operations, as well as urban and forest lands too. This year, we've got, I was just going to mention the two bigger programs, the Environmental Quality and Assistance Program, people call it EQIP. And that is, again, coming to us, getting a conservation plan, getting a contract, and installing those conservation systems and getting the incentive payment. The conservation stewardship plan is kind of the next step up if you've got a pretty high level of stewardship already and you just want to take it further. The CSP is another program where you can do additional enhancements. But we accept applications all year round. And this year we just got some new funding through the Inflation Reduction Act for climate smart agricultural practices specifically. The deadline for this year is March 17th. So I recommend you call your local district and sign up. And I had mentioned incentive payments. This is just showing some of the cover crop scenarios. There's a lot of scenarios for each practice. So the incentive payment varies depending on which scenario works for you and your farm and where you are. If it's in a high priority area, you can get a little higher payment rate. If you're considered a historically underserved producer, you can get a little higher payment rate. All the payments are meant to just be an incentive. They don't cover the whole cost, but they do help. And so just an example of some of the conservation systems when we're talking about our NRCS climate smart agriculture and forestry practices. When we look at the resource concern of soil health, we're looking to increase the carbon sequestration and reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So you can do things like crop rotation, residue tillage management, cover crop, mulching, nutrient management. Those would be from our list of climate smart ag practices. And then you can do maybe some facilitating practices like pest management to make that system work even better. And that would be under our EQIP program, under CSP. If you wanted to do something a little a higher level enhancement, you can do resource conserving crop rotation, enhanced cover crops, mulching for specialty crops. With grazing land management, to reduce the methane emissions for manure and build carbon stocks in perennial grasses and pastured soils. We're looking at prescribed grazing as that primary climate smart ag practice. And we probably want some facilitating practices for that to make that happen, to interior fencing and livestock watering, maybe reseeding your pasture land. Maybe you need to do a stream crossing or some trails and walkways for the animals. That would be EQIP. And then for CSP, those enhancements, bale grazing, intensive rotational grazing, converting cropland to grass-based agriculture, diversifying forages with interseeding, forage plantings that improve wildlife habitat. For livestock waste management, reducing the methane emissions from manure storage facilities. Those primary climate smart ag practices would be the waste separation facility. Really, that would help support something like a digester, and nutrient management. And then to help make those things happen, facilitating practices could include waste transfer, getting the roofs and covers over, subsurface drain, heavy use areas, and a waste storage facility. For addressing agroforestry, forest management, upland wildlife habitat to help, again, build the carbon stock in the more perennial biomass. The primary practices through EQIP would be forest stand improvement scenarios like crop mash tree release, girdling, thinning, and small patch cuts. And you may want to have the facilitating practice of brush management for the invasive plants and forest trails or stream crossings. And with the CSP, you could do something like facilitating oak regeneration, summer roosting habitat for bats, and forest songbird habitat maintenance. And for a list of those, you could do forest farming is a newly adopted practice by Connecticut NRCS. I'm not sure about Massachusetts, but that's if you want to grow things in your forest, or like medicinals, mushrooms, wildlife habitat planting, planting trees and shrubs, managing wildlife habitat with mowing, wind breaks, and then always buffers. We support buffers in every one of our programs, plantings alongside the rivers and streams and wetlands. And then facilitating practices could include the brush management for invasives, mostly access control, and preparing the site to plant the trees. And finally, let's see, we've got some more CSP. So those are the enhancements, planting tree and shrubs specifically to restore native communities. Edge feathering. So if you got those trees hanging into your cropland on the edge there, and you'd like to take care of those instead of having the cropland and then just woodland, getting some diverse structure to the edge of the woodland helps with wildlife. So that's called edge feathering for wildlife cover on cropland. Establishing pollinator habitat, and again, making a buffer that exists even wider. And then for energy practices, reducing emissions from ag operations and infrastructure. Let's see, energy and fuel efficiency systems. So for greenhouses, there's And this would all be under the EQIP program, be roof vents, heating, ventilation fans, greenhouse screens, installation, LED lighting, farmsteads and different types of farms and dairy farms, replacing scroll press compressors, motor upgrades, hot water heaters, ventilation fans, again, LED lighting, and then the maple syrup operations, evaporators, SAC preheaters, and the reverse osmosis. That's the picture of that machine down there. And those all would require an energy audit, and we can help pay for that audit to an energy management plan. So if you're interested and you've never applied for NRCS, we can help you with that application process. If you weren't approved, if you're already approved and you weren't, or you've already applied and you weren't approved, try again. And I've got contact sheets on the table over there, along with the list of practices and other information that you might find interesting. And this is the contact information that you probably can't read from the back of the room, but that is all I have to share. And I'm open for questions if you'd like